"Enjoy the flames, Mom." That was the last thing he said before the key turned in the door. I didn't run to the window. I didn't pound on the walls. I just stood there, wine glass still in hand, and watched the thickened air curl around the ceiling like it had something to say. The smoke wasn't loud. It never is at first. It whispered. It traced the edges of the cabinets and settled near the floorboards, lazy and certain. Russell didn't raise his voice. He never did when he meant it. I heard his boots on the porch step, slow and steady, then nothing. No engine. No second thoughts. I set the wine glass down gently beside the folded napkin. There was a photo tucked beneath the placemat, a mistake. He must have pulled it out of the drawer and forgotten to put it back. It was the one from Yosemite. My husband had a fish in one hand and our son in the other. The corner was singed. I didn't know from when. I could feel the heat now not roaring, but building like a warning clearing its throat. The cabin creaked, and a crack split through the paint by the stovepipe. I could taste something bitter on the back of my tongue. Not fear, not yet. Just the kind of bitter that tells you the person you raised doesn't see you as a person anymore. This place wasn't just home. My husband built it with his hands, every plank, every pipe. He showed Russell how to brace a roof beam right over that corner there. But Russell was always impatient. Always cutting corners. And that's how I knew he'd forgotten the hatch. I crossed the kitchen slowly. The smoke thickened behind me. My eyes burned, but my steps didn't shake. I dropped to my knees beside the pantry, pressed my hand to the floor, and waited for the warmth to tell me where the hinges still were. He forgot what I never would. The floor groaned under my weight, warmer than it should have been. I pressed my palm flat, feeling for the faint seam in the wood. My husband had carved it himself, hidden beneath the pantry shelves, just in case a fire ever came fast and ugly from the south ridge. He never expected I'd need it because of our son. The smoke stung worse when I got low, curling under the pantry door like it was hunting me. I grabbed the wool throw from the chair and wrapped it around my hands, groping blindly until my fingers found the groove. I slid the panel back, praying the hinges hadn't rusted shut. They hadn't. My husband had sealed them with oil and stubbornness. The opening was narrow, but I lowered myself in feet. First, the ladder rungs rough against my palms. The air shifted cooler, earthier, less judgmental. I could still hear the fire above crackling like laughter. The tunnel was cramped, packed with damp soil and old pine roots. I moved on hands and knees, teeth, clenched knees bruising with every inch. My breath rasped in my throat, and for a moment, I thought I might not make it. But I remembered his voice, soft but firm. If you ever need out fast, follow the slope. You'll hit light behind the shed. I followed the slope. I don't remember how long it took, only the feel of bark scraping my shoulder as I crawled free, the stars above, spinning like they weren't sure whether to cheer or mourn. My legs buckled, but I stood. The cabin was behind me, now, a dull red flicker through the trees. I walked. 2 miles of dirt road, broken fences, cold air scraping at my throat. My jacket was still inside. My phone, too. All I had left were the keys buried in the emergency tin by the shed, the ones I'd never told Russell about. I saw the barn light just before I collapsed. Janie's place. My husband always said it was good to have one friend close and one secret kept. I had both. The denim jacket Janie draped over my shoulders smelled faintly of wood smoke and mint soap. I didn't say anything at first. My throat ached, my lungs burned, and the weight of the walk still clung to my knees. Janie didn't push. She sat beside me at the kitchen table, one hand wrapped around her mug, the other resting near mine. I took a sip of water, then another. The shaking stopped around the third glass. "He locked me in," I said finally. "Lit the fire himself." She blinked hard, set the mug down. "Russell." I nodded. He said it was easier that way. Janie didn't speak for a long time. She just reached for my hand like we were tethering each other to something that hadn't burned down. He thinks he's getting the money, I said. He thinks once the papers are filed and I'm gone, everything just transfers. Does it? No. That word felt good, heavy, final. 2 years ago, I moved the bulk of the account into a conservation trust. Titles buried under shell names, and there's a biometric lock, fingerprint and retinal. Janie let out a low whistle. And you never told him, never even hinted. He thought I was predictable, thought I was sentimental and soft, and too tired to outthink him. He figured I'd just leave everything in a folder for him to sign and collect. He only sees what he wants to inherit. He doesn't see what I protected. Then I remembered something else. There's a trail cam behind the shed, I said slowly. Set up for bobcats last spring. You think it caught him? It's motion activated. It's aimed at the back porch. He didn't look for it because he didn't know it was there. We both knew what that meant. The face. The words. The act. I stood carefully. My legs were still sore, but my thoughts weren't. I need to see if it's still there, I said already. Picturing the slope, the stump, the path that ran behind the property line. Janie reached for her truck keys without asking. I used to think Russell's charm was a gift. Even when he was a boy, he could talk anyone into anything. His teachers loved him. His coaches trusted him. And I, God help me, I believed every word he ever said. He had his father's grin, that half smile that could make you forget to breathe when you were angry. It changed after his business collapsed. The first time he came to me, he was polite, nervous even. Said he needed a bridge loan just until things settled. He made it sound reasonable, temporary, like I was helping him across a small crack in the road. By the time I understood how deep the hole really was, I'd already signed the transfer. $82,000 gone. He called 2 days later. Voice bright again. Thanks, Mom. You saved me. Vanessa texted instead of calling. Just a short message. We really appreciate your support. No signature, no warmth. The next month, their number stopped appearing on my screen at all. That was when I stopped pretending I didn't know who they'd become. I rewrote everything, the will, the trust, the estate. I split it among the causes my husband and I had built. Land Preservation Scholarship funds the wildlife center that bore his name. Russell would get a fraction enough to show I hadn't disowned him completely, enough to stop him from claiming cruelty. When he found out, the calls began again. Not angry at first, just sweet. He'd ask how I was sleeping, whether I'd been eating well. I almost believed him once the night he said he missed the sound of our back porch light buzzing when he was a kid. But I caught the hesitation, the pause where he should have remembered more than a sound. He wasn't calling to talk. He was calling to measure, to see how much of me was left to take. That's when I started keeping records, dates, times, tone, because deep down I knew he wasn't done, and neither was I. We found the camera exactly where I'd left it, wedged between 2 branches behind the old fence line, its casing streaked with soot but intact. The fire hadn't touched that part of the woods. Janie held the flashlight steady, while I opened the compartment with numb fingers and slipped out the memory card. Back at her house, we watched the footage on her laptop, neither of us speaking. The timestamp burned into the corner, 11:42 p.m. There he was, Russell. Stepping out from the porch, shoulders relaxed, mouth twisted in something close to satisfaction, and whispered, "Enjoy the flames, Mom." Then he was gone. 2 minutes later, his voice came again, this time from the speakerphone in his hand. Vanessa's tone was sharp, clipped, unmistakable. "You made sure she was out right. I locked the door. If there's no body, this whole thing falls apart. They didn't just want me gone. They wanted it airtight. No loose ends. No doubts. Just a clean death, preferably with an insurance claim to follow." I sat there for a long time after the video ended. Janie offered to call someone, but I shook my head. Not yet. Not like this. I copied the file to a fresh USB, then printed still frames. Russell's face, the timestamp, the flames behind the window. I placed them in a plain manila envelope, sealed it, and slipped it into the pocket of my coat. The next morning, we drove back to what was left of the cabin. The walls were scorched to the studs, the roof bowed in like a spine that had finally given up. But the stone stove at the center still stood, blackened, cracked, but whole. I opened the firebox, placed the envelope inside, and closed the door. No note. No threat. Just evidence, quiet and waiting. If he thought I'd vanished into ash, I wanted him to walk through the ruins with that same smug grin. I wanted him to feel safe just long enough for the truth to burn back. 3 days later, just after noon, they arrived. Janie and I watched from the woods above the ridge, crouched low between pine roots and frost-dried ferns. Her old binoculars fogged slightly as she adjusted the focus. Russell stepped out of the SUV, first one hand holding a bottle of champagne, the other stuffed in the pocket of his flannel coat. Vanessa followed, dressed too sharply for the ash and char they were stepping into. Her boots were new, but already streaked with soot. Probably still smelled like the first fire. They weren't quiet. Laughter floated across the clearing, tight, theatrical. Russell kicked a blackened beam aside and stepped through what used to be the kitchen. I saw him pause briefly at the pantry, then move on without flinching. Vanessa trailed behind him until she reached the stove. She bent down, hand brushing the handle. She opened it. Even from our distance, I saw her recoil. Her hand flew to her chest, then hovered there, frozen. Russell joined her, looking inside. I imagined his face as he read the handwriting he'd known since childhood. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't even emotional. Just my name and the date, followed by a line I knew he'd understand. This time I left something that burns longer. He grabbed the envelope. They argued low, sharp. Vanessa's hands moved in clipped, panicked gestures. Russell looked toward the trees once, as if sensing he wasn't alone, but it was too late for awareness now. They left fast. No toast, no smug victory walk, just dirt kicking behind their tires as they tore back down the gravel path. Janie and I waited until the engine faded. Then she looked at me and said, "Now what?" I stood brushing pine needles from my knees and picked up the second envelope from my bag. This one didn't contain a USB. It held documents. "Now we go see Elliot," I said. "And we make sure they never step foot on that land again." Elliot Maris hadn't changed much in 15 years. His hair was thinner, his voice rougher, but his handshake still had that steady grip that told you things would hold together, even when you didn't. He'd been my husband's attorney long before I ever understood what a trust could protect. When I called him, I didn't explain everything over the phone, just said I needed to discuss an old file. He told me to come by after hours. No questions. The office was small, tucked above a bakery on Main Street. Elliot poured coffee and waited until I told him the story from the first call to the fire. When I finished, he just leaned back and sighed through his nose like a man remembering the worst part of a promise kept. "Ben always said this might happen," he murmured. "That's why he built in the contingencies." He opened a locked drawer, pulled out a folder thick with papers, and began spreading them across the desk. Original trust documents, notarized transfers, digital encryption keys. All still valid. My ownership stood untouched. "He can't access a cent," Elliot said, tracing a line of text with his pen. "But I'm freezing his accounts anyway. If he tried to move anything after the fire, it'll show intent. Fraud. Possibly attempted transfer post-mortem." He typed quietly for several minutes, the sound of each keystroke landing like a small verdict. I watched his hands, the same hands that had once guided us through setting up the fund for our land, our future, our son. Now they were the same hands locking that future out of reach. "I don't want to fight," I said. "Just the record clean. The truth written somewhere official." Elliot nodded. Then we'll document everything. No emotion, just proof. He printed the affidavit and slid it toward me. My name sat neatly at the bottom, waiting. I picked up the pen, steadied my wrist, and signed. When I looked up, Elliot had already gathered the papers into a file. Now he said, "Keep your phone close." These things move fast once they realize the money's gone. The knock came just after sunset. One sharp familiar. Janie was washing dishes when I heard it. I dried my hands on the towel and stepped to the door. I didn't ask who it was. I already knew. Russell stood there, shoulders hunched, lips, pale eyes darting everywhere but mine. He looked smaller than I remembered, like someone who had finally realized he was no longer the one holding the matches. "You were supposed to be dead," he said. His voice cracked on the last word, like it cost him something to say it out loud. "Why would you do this to us?" I didn't answer. I looked at him, really looked at him. Not like a mother searching for the boy she once knew, but like someone studying a stranger who'd tried to make a calculation and lost the bet. He'd come without Vanessa. No car keys in his hand, no confidence in his stance, just questions and fear wrapped in the same coat he probably wore when he lit the fire. "I gave you everything I knew how to give," I said finally. "And you tried to end me like I was an obstacle." He didn't move. I took one breath, maybe two, then asked, "Would you have cried at my funeral or just smiled for the check?" His mouth opened slightly, but no words came. He blinked once, then dropped his gaze to the porch floor like it might offer him an answer. I didn't wait for one. I closed the door slowly. Not with anger, not with spite. Just the kind of finality you give to a chapter that doesn't deserve another sentence. Janie didn't ask what he said. She just locked the back door and made us tea. Outside, his footsteps faded. I didn't look through the window to watch him go. I had nothing left to prove. The next morning, I woke to a call from Elliot. He told me the bank had flagged Russell's transfer attempts, 3 of them all dated within hours of the fire. They came 2 days later in 2 black sedans and a county-marked SUV. Suits stepped out first, then plain clothes. One of them carried a file nearly 2 inches thick. I didn't have to open it to know what was inside: copies of the trust, the footage from the trail cam, the bank reports Elliot had sent without ceremony. They asked me 2 questions. I answered simply, clearly. No embellishment, no bitterness. They didn't need more than that. One of them, a woman with a folder full of photographs, told me quietly that Russell had filed the insurance claim the day before the fire. The documents were time-stamped, signed, and sent from his own IP address. He'd requested a rush evaluation. In his statement, he'd called it a structure of emotional and financial significance. I didn't laugh, but I could have. He never once called it home. Not after Ben died. They reviewed the footage again, this time with their own tech. The resolution held. The audio was clear. His voice as he walked away. Vanessa's echo on the phone. The smoke curling in the background like punctuation. They didn't need me to testify. Not for this. The investigator shook my hand gently before leaving. "You don't need to be there when we bring him in," she said. "He's already done the speaking." I sat on the porch as they left the tires rolling slow up the gravel road toward the last address he'd used. I didn't ask what would happen next. I already knew. The hills still smelled like char. The air carried it sharp and dry. But it was mine. Every inch of it. Registered. Protected. Untouched by his name. I ran my hand along the porch railing Ben had built. The wood was scorched, but the nails still held. Down the path, Janie's dog barked once. The sun edged above the ridge, soft and plain. I didn't feel victorious. I felt ready. Tomorrow I'd meet with the land trust coordinator and sign the final deed transfer. Let them try and burn what's already been returned to the soil. The new cabin isn't much. Smaller footprint, fewer windows, no pretense of grandeur. just enough to breathe, to cook, to rest. I built it on the edge of the clearing, a few feet from where the old porch used to end. The soil there is darker now, richer somehow, as if it remembers what stood and what didn't. I kept the hatch, rebuilt it with stronger hinges and sealed wood, not because I think I'll need it again, but because it deserves to remain. Some things survive because they were built to. Others because they learned how. The stove is the same. Cleaned, repaired, reinstalled. The crack along the backplate still shows if you know where to look. I left it untouched. A reminder, not a flaw. There's only one photo on the wall now. Ben in his old field jacket, holding a map like it was a promise. We'd taken that shot just before the snow rolled in one October, laughing because he'd gotten us lost for the second time in the same weekend. I remember that day better than I remember most birthdays. Janie still comes by every Sunday. She brings tea leaves, not bags, and we sit on the new steps, watching birds return to the edges of the trees. We don't talk about Russell. There's nothing left to say. I've signed the final transfer. The land is fully protected now. No subdivisions, no timber contracts, no sudden offers from developers. The forest will outlive all of us. Some nights when the wind comes through just right, I hear it moving through the pines, the way it always did, like a hush that forgives what it can and buries the rest. There's no nameplate on the gate, no mailbox, just the narrow road, the long breath of trees, and the kind of quiet that doesn't ask to be earned. This isn't where everything ended. It's just where I stopped carrying what was never mine to hold.